Enterprise Cybersecurity Policy Presentation, Team R. Social collaborative tools such as Slack and Telegram help businesses to be constantly available and to maintain a technical edge over competitors. However, they do not come without their own dangers. Both Slack and Telegram have been subject to data breaches recently. Slack confirmed on their own corporate blog that they were hacked during March 2015 and user information was compromised. It would be unrealistic to expect firms not to use this collaborative software, but with that in mind, when addressing cybersecurity concerns, any policies have to consider the three main assets of the firm. These being the reputation of the firm, the ability to practice law, and the efficiency of any work done by the firm. Data is the common denominator between these three assets which ties them all together to the point where it can be considered a valuable asset in itself. Maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of the data is key to all 3 points. Without the data, the firm cannot manage client accounts, it can't take cases to court, or proceed through any legal processes. Aside from that, any policy made has to consider both internal and external factors within the company. The internal factors being the convenience for employees and convenience for clients. Externally, competitiveness in the business market, regulatory bodies, and legislation and other legal concerns must be considered when making any policy. This is particularly relevant for a legal firm, as lawyers operate within it are held to certain standards lest they risk being accused of professional negligence. A lawyer could be considered negligent if they do not take reasonable steps in order to protect any clients. This is referred to as a lawyer's duty of care. This will soon be managed by the General Data Protection Regulation, which enters into application on the 25th of May 2018 and will be the benchmark by which all data protection is measured. This applies to both controllers and processors of data and requires that data should be processed in a lawful, fair and transparent manner. Despite the fact that the UK is preparing to leave the EU in the wake of the recent referendum, it will be expected that any policies will still be in line with EU precedents in order to remain competitive and up to date in the international business market. Finally, any policy must consider the main areas of security objectives, also known as the CIA triad. These three main security objectives are confidentiality of data, integrity of data, and availability of data. Within this policy, they will be arranged within a hierarchy, with confidentiality being Tier 1, the paramount concern, integrity being Tier 2, and availability being Tier 3. Availability is considered the least important of the three, but it must still be considered due to the internal factor of employee and client ease. This brings us to the assessment of the policy.
When considering security objectives, it is vital to identify the main assets of the firm which require protecting and address the security objectives related to them directly. In regards to evaluating assets, we must consider how grave the consequence and how high the likelihood of compromise. The three assets are 1. Allowance to practice law. Confidentiality as data is vital in protecting this asset. Next, the reputation of the firm. Integrity of data helps protect this asset. And finally, efficiency of work. By ensuring availability of data, then efficiency will increase. Security risks regarding confidentiality of data. The first risk is technical compromise due to cloud-based data storage. If data is stored in a public cloud, then if a technical issue arises, other residents may have access to the firm's data. A solution here would to host data within private clouds. Second issue is malicious third-party access to data and rest. Attacks can occur through side channel attacks on servers or physically accessing the data on the devices of which it's held. Here it is vital to encrypt data at risk. Now we are moving on to the security risk regarding integrity of data. Software or hardware malfunction. Data, when passed over an insecure network, may be corrupted. Here we must ensure that software and hardware is regularly checked for viruses and malfunctions. A second risk is the malicious intrusion of data in transit. Man-in-the-middle attacks impersonate a user through a communication channel and communicate incorrect information. Solution here would be to have end-to-end encryption coupled with endpoint authorization. A next issue that we have is in regards to forging encryption keys. Attackers can send forged encryption keys, which client will then use to encrypt their data with, and then the attacker may use it to decode it. Here again, we must enforce endpoint authorization. Another way by which data can be, the integrity of data can be compromised is by physical access to encryption keys. Attackers may have access to a device. The main solution here is good hygiene, so a two-step verification, and also to ensure that devices are held within the firm. Finally, one of the last points in regards to integrity of data is the inadvertent user error. An employee might accidentally delete a database, a critical database. In this case, we must ensure that users are properly trained and checked regularly. Finally, we move on to the availability of data. In this case, we have two concerns, one of which is data may not be accessible during planned downtime. When patches to software are applied, the data is not available at this point. A solution here would be to ensure that the planned downtime occurs during times where it's not critical to have access to the data, i.e. Sunday evening. And our last point in regards to a risk is if the service is discontinued. There is always a potential prospect that a service may be discontinued due to financial problems. In this case, there should be a continuity clause which is drawn up, by which an eschewed agent is supplied with the source code for the software and will help implement this into the infrastructure of the firm.
The policy part in our report contains 8 points. The first one is mandatory employee certification and auditing that requires employees that come into contact with data or files, either in transit or at rest, should be logged into a report including the employee's name, the time and the date, etc., and any changes made. Second one is quality checks on staff and softwares. Staff should be fully trained and software should be checked regularly. Third one is end-to-end encryption. The encryption key should be held by the client themselves in order to ensure access is controlled by them, and any deletion of the key is the client's prerogative. The fourth one is hygiene, which requires strong password and update malware software regularly. Then is a great scheduled amount of downtime. For each downtime, every software and hardware should be checked regularly too. Then is the file storage versus data storage. That means both files and data should only be retained for 12 months before being automatically purged, unless a contract with a client party states otherwise. The last one is data location. In this policy, all backup data is expected to adhere to the same standards of security outlined in this policy. Firms should be expected to have data stored within jurisdictions that they are legally registered and operate within, and all data should be stored within the European Economic Area by the 12th of May 2018. The final part of our report is policy review. At the end, the firm implements the policies and it runs well so that it can ensure the confidentiality, availability, integrity are all in safe. And this will affect day-to-day running of the company. More details about reviews are shown on the slides. That's all.